Welcome back to the Job Site, Soul Fam. I'm Max Soul, your lead composer and chief engineer.
And I'm Mello Soul, your head of operations and vocal specialist.
Oh, you certainly are.
And you're in the mix with Max and Mello's Architects of Soul.
Today, Soul Fam, we are auditing a massive turning point in the structural history of R&B. We're stepping onto the manufacturing floor of Detroit during the late 1960s to look at a radical zoning overhaul. We are deconstructing how producer Norman Whitfield and the Temptations completely gutted the polite, radio-friendly Motown assembly line and built the heavy, distorted infrastructure known as Psychedelic Soul.
Yes, Max, this session is all about risk management. In the mid-'60s, Motown had the most successful, pristine finishing school blueprint in the world. The Temptations were the crown jewel with those sharp suits.
And didn't they look fine?
Yeah, the iconic Temptation walk choreography and those beautiful David Ruffin love ballads like My Girl.
So, Mello, to really understand why the bricks fell the way they did in 1968, we have to look at the internal structural collapse of the Temptations' old framework and the macro-environmental shifts that forced Norman Whitfield to completely change his engineering specs. It wasn't just a simple singer switch. It was a perfect storm of ego, explosion, street-level friction, and a business model that was rapidly running out of tread.
That's right, Max. David Ruffin didn't just walk away from the group. His ego outgrew the foundation. By 1967, Ruffin was the undisputed marquee voice of Motown's biggest group, delivering historic lead lines on My Girl, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, and I Wish It Would Rain. But that star power corrupted his corporate alignment, and the other four members essentially forced to issue an eviction notice.
That's right. David Ruffin saw Berry Gordy rezone Motown's top female group into Diana Ross and the Supremes. So not to be outdone, Mello, he demanded the exact same blueprint for his group, David Ruffin and the Temptations. Well, that didn't sit too well with the other members, especially Otis Williams, who founded the group, and flatly refused to let one ego-dominated group built on collective equity.
So, Max, it seemed David Ruffin's ego was out of control. That's
Apparently, right?
That's an understatement, yeah. He stopped traveling with the group in their standard station wagon. He bought a custom mink-lined limousine instead and started skipping rehearsals, arriving late to sound checks and missing legacy performance bookings entirely.
Yeah, not the best behavior, I'm thinking, Mello. Apparently, the group conscious thing was not his thing. Big surprise coming, though. In June 1968, David Ruffin skipped a major live performance at a theater in Cleveland to go watch his new girlfriend perform instead. And the Temptations had to hire a temporary singer on the fly just to execute the gig. Well, that was it. The group officially voted him out of the frame.
When Ruffin was evicted, Soul Fam, Norman Whitfield didn't panic. He saw it as a massive opportunity for industrial retrofit.
Yep, and there were two specific elements, Mello, that convinced him that the old love ballad blueprint was dead. By 1967, Dennis Edwards was fronting another legendary Motown group called The Contours, famous for the 1962 smash, Do You Love Me? We all know that song. And as David Ruffin's behavior became increasingly volatile and unpredictable throughout late 67 and into early 68, Otis Williams, who was the Temptations' foundational anchor, as we said before, and producer Norman Whitfield secretly began running diagnostic checks on the other vocalists within the Motown roster, keeping it in-house, as it were, Mello.
They needed an emergency backup plan in case Ruffin's structure collapsed completely, Max. Otis Williams would slip into the back of local Detroit clubs to watch the Contours perform. He noticed that Dennis Edwards didn't just have the powerhouse voice. He possessed an aggressive, high-energy stage commanding presence and a raw, church-hewn gospel shout that could cut right through a loud brass section.
He had an amazing voice. He really did. So when David Ruffin officially missed that fateful Cleveland gig in 1968, the Temptations knew the contract was breached for the last time. They didn't wait around. Directly after voting Ruffin out of the group, Otis Williams and Motown executive Al Abrams cornered Dennis Edwards. They didn't pitch him in a standard corporate interview either, Mello. They met him in a car in a dark Detroit parking lot in the middle of the night to lay down the blueprint.
Otis looked at Dennis and said flat out, "We're letting David go."
Quite a moment.
We want you to be the new lead singer of the Temptations. Well, Max, Dennis Edwards was stunned.
I'll bet.
The Temptations were the top-tier skyscraper of the industry. He accepted the contract right on the spot, and who wouldn't have?
Who wouldn't have? Exactly.
I would have. But it came with a massive trial by fire.
And really, who knew there was a stalker in the house? I mean, I guess you could say that David Ruffin was just a little put out when he got fired.
A little.
Yeah, ego, baby. Makes you pay in the long run, Mello. So Dennis Edwards was officially announced as the new lead singer in July 1968. But as I intimated before, David Ruffin did not go quietly into this good night, Soul Fam. And what followed? It's one of the wildest hazing rituals in music history.
So, Max, during Dennis's first few live concerts with the Temptations, David Ruffin would literally stalk the venues.
They couldn't get him on the job when they needed him. But now he's stalking
exactly.
the venues.
So in the middle of the set, while Dennis was on stage singing, David Ruffin would suddenly sprint out from the wings, jump onto the stage planks, snatch the microphone right out of Dennis's hand.
That must have been quite some sight.
Oh, yeah, and start belting out the lead vocals to Ain't Too Proud to Beg or My Girl to the screaming crowd.
Amazing how you can have something in your hand you should cherish and not cherish it, and then lose it and lose your mind over what you wouldn't do in the first place.
There you go.
David was just a little late to the party understanding that. Like a little 5-year-old, he realizes he just lost his candy and he went out his goddamn mind. I mean, I have to hand it to Dennis Mello. He was the ultimate professional. He didn't panic or get aggressive. He showed incredible business literacy and emotional restraint. Surely more than I would have done if you asked me, Soul Fam. But Dennis was a pro, unlike David Ruffin, apparently. Apparently he's right. So every time Ruffin hijacked that stage, Dennis would calmly step back into the background vocal line and blend into the choreography with the other guys, while patiently waiting for security to come and escort Ruffin off the property before stepping back into the front mic to finish the job.
Oh, the humanity, Max.
Right? You can't believe it.
This bizarre stage warfare lasted for several weeks. Dennis's grace under pressure combined with his undeniable roaring vocal delivery,
Which he had.
Yeah, it completely solidified his position. Norman Whitfield saw how Dennis commanded the room during that chaos and knew he had found the exact steel beam needed to build the psychedelic era.
Not only did he bring a completely different vocal compound to this job site, Soul Fam, where David Ruffin had a soaring, dramatic, high, churchy tenor, while Dennis Edwards possessed a rugged, sandpaper, high-octane grit. In a word, he was powerful. Norman Whitfield realized instantly that putting Dennis's raw, freight train voice over sweet, polite violins and lyrics about sunshine and honey, well, that would be a massive misuse of resources. Don't you think so, Mello?
Yeah, it wouldn't
So
work.
now he needed an instrumental background that matched the heavy, abrasive texture of his new lead vocalist.
And this was the true turning point in both the Motown world and out in the world, Max.
Truly.
Norman Whitfield was a master field observer, and he noticed a profound cultural disconnect. The concrete was cracking.
The concrete was cracking. It surely was, Mello. In July 1967, the Detroit riots tore through the city right outside Hitsville U.S.A.'s front doors. Tanks were rolling down West Grand Boulevard, and smoke filled the skyline. On the radio, Sly and the Family Stone dropped dance to the music, and Jimi Hendrix was tearing up the spectrum with heavy, overdriven feedback and wah-wah pedals. Black and white youths were turning away from polite pop and looking for music that sounded like the chaotic, revolutionary reality of the streets, the 70s.
Norman Whitfield looked at the charts and realized that Motown's traditional clean-cut finishing school aesthetic was beginning to look outdated compared to the raw, amplified counterculture. He famously realized that if Motown didn't evolve, it would become a museum piece.
Right you are, Mel. Norman realized that if he could take the unhinged raw power of psychedelic rock and fuse it with the pocket-perfect groove of the Funk Brothers, well, he could create a weapon that would dominate both the R&B market and the mainstream rock festivals. Thinking to himself, wow, this is the way to go. Should I check with Berry?
No.
No. Well, stop. No. He didn't wait for permission from Berry Gordy because he probably just would have gotten another argument, Mel.
Yeah, this is where the corporate drama at Hitsville U.S.A. plays out like a high-stakes chess match, Max. Norman Whitfield executing this psychedelic shift behind Berry Gordy's back was an absolute corporate insurgency.
Oh, it was a war.
And when Gordy found out, Max, it resulted in a massive structural standoff. Massive structural standoff at the weekly Friday morning quality control meetings. And the way Norman beat the system is legendary.
At Motown, no record hit the store shelves without passing Berry Gordy's personal quality control board, Soul Fam. So every Friday, producers, executives, and songwriters sat in a room, played their new tracks on a cheap car speaker because it had to mimic what the kids would hear on AM radio, and voted. And Berry Gordy held the ultimate veto power.
And into play returns
our sneaky friend,
Norman Sneaky Whitfield.
Sneaky Whitfield.
Norman knew that if he asked Gordy for a budget to cut a psychedelic rock soul hybrid track with wah-wah pedals and lyrics about street struggles,
damn right,
Gordy would have deadbolted the studio doors.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah, so look at the fight for what's going on.
For 2 years.
Yeah, Gordy's corporate mandate was the sound of young America. Clean, safe, aspirational pop that wouldn't alienate white suburban radio programmers. Typical Berry Gordy.
So old sneaky Norman decides to use his clout as a hitmaker to track Cloud 9 in secret with Dennis Edwards and the Funk Brothers. He brought the finished master tape to the Friday meeting, and he slipped it into the playback stack without giving Gordy a heads up on the radical change in design specs. Oh, Mello, I could see the writing on the wall.
And when the tape rolled and that aggressive swirling Dennis Coffey wah-wah guitar leaked out of the test speaker, the room went dead silent.
I bet it did.
Then Dennis Edwards' gritty voice dropped, followed by the group shouting about living on cloud 9 just to survive the reality of the slums.
Well, Soul Fam, you guessed it. Berry Gordy absolutely flipped. He stopped the tape and hit Norman with a heavy structural audit. Gordy looked at the title Cloud 9 and the lyrics about riding high to escape hard times. His blood pressure rising, and he yelled, "Are you out your mind, Norman? This is a drug record. You're singing about smoking pot and getting high. You're going to destroy the Temptations' squeaky clean corporate image?" Now, to be truthful, Soul fam, lyricists Barrett Strong and Norman, they didn't do drugs. They were literally writing a metaphor about poverty and checking out of a broken society. And nice to jump to conclusions, Barry. Always looking for the high road. Never seen that before, have we, Mel?
Barry, Max, never.
No.
Gordy argued that the white top 40 radio stations would immediately ban the record, destroying Motown's primary cross-market revenue stream.
Oh, no.
He adamantly wanted to shelve the asset permanently and force the Temptations to go back and record another traditional love ballad.
And this is where Norman's political genius inside the factory paid off, Mello. He didn't just back down. He stood his ground and forced a vote among the Motown staff sitting at the table. The younger executives, A&R reps, and even Otis Williams himself backed Norman up. They told Gordy, "Barry, you're out of touch on this one. Step outside the building. The kids on the street are already listening to Sly and Jimi Hendrix. If we do not put this one out, the Temptations are going to look like antiques." Well, I'll bet that was an interesting moment for Barry. Probably a first.
Oh, maybe so, because for the first time, Berry Gordy allowed himself to be outvoted by his creative staff.
Wow.
Naturally, he washed his hands of it.
Of course he did. That's the only way he would do
Exactly. Basically telling Norman, if this bomb drops and destroys the group's market cap, it's your head on the chopping block.
Yeah, way to believe, Barry. Well, Mel, Cloud 9 hit the streets in October 1968. It didn't ruin the brand. It supercharged it. The record exploded up the charts, hitting number 2 on the R&B charts and crashing into the pop top 10. But the final structural verification came in March of 1969 at the Grammy Awards. And Cloud 9 won the award for Best Rhythm and Blues Group Performance.
And Soul Fam, it was the first Grammy Award in the entire history of Motown Records.
Take that, Barry.
Okay? Norman Whitfield didn't just prove Gordy wrong. He handed the chairman a trophy that forced him to validate the entire psychedelic architecture.
My man, Norman. And from that moment on, Gordy gave Norman a blank check, total zoning autonomy to track whatever dark, long-form cinematic soul projects he wanted. Thus, of course, leading straight to War, Ball of Confusion, and Papa Was a Rolling Stone. Badass.
Now, that is the ultimate macro lesson for every independent creator and modern R&B artist tracking their path today, Max.
Bet.
The industry layout changes constantly. You cannot expect a vintage 1965 marketing and production blueprint to work, not when the entire social landscape around your audience has been completely rezoned. And as you see, Norman Whitfield, not waiting for permission from the front office,
exactly,
made adjustments to his sonic gear to reflect the actual temperature of the pavement, Max, and then hit it.
And that's right. And he dragged Motown out of the ballroom and straight into the basement, Mello. And then we're going to go step into the tracking room and break down the exact engineering tools he used to pull off the sonic switch when we come back.
Stick close to the scaffolding. The renovation is about to begin.
You're hanging with Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we are tearing the roof off the genius of Norman Whitfield.
Sit tight, y'all.
Hey, welcome back to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul. Before we break down the acoustic displacement of this psychedelic shift, if you like this content, please give a like and subscribe to our channel. And remember, there is a video version available on our YouTube page if you feel like watching instead of just listening.
All right, Max, let's talk about the actual studio labor behind this shift. Because before Norman completely flipped the Temptations, he ran a major beta test on a song that completely redefined the Motown layout. I heard it through the grapevine.
Oh, man, Mello, the grapevine blueprint is completely wild, Soul fam. Norman Whitfield actually tracked that song 4 different times with different artists because Berry Gordy just kept shutting it down at the weekly quality control meeting. The first version to hit the tape was Smokey Robinson and the Miracles in 1966, but Berry flat out vetoed that as a single. Then Norman went into the booth with Marvin Gaye in 1967.
And that Marvin session was pure studio warfare, Max.
Berry on the warpath.
Yeah, Norman wanted Marvin to sing the vocal completely out of his comfort zone, above his natural range, scratching at the ceiling to get that same strained rasp that he pulled out of David Ruffin on Ain't Too Proud to Beg. Marvin fought him tooth and nail, but Norman insisted.
Yeah, Sneaky was getting his way.
Yeah, they spent a full month overdubbing the backing tracking with the Funk Brothers, the Detroit Symphony, and the Andante's background vocals. It was a haunting, dark masterpiece, but guess what? Berry Gordy rejected Marvin's version, too. He said it was too dark, too moody, and it didn't fit the radio specs.
Yeah, we can't use it. Won't make us any money. Get it away. So what does Norman do? You know that's what he said. I mean, so what does Norman do? Well, he refuses to let that asset sit on the shelf. So he takes the song to Gladys Knight and the Pips. Season 2, episode 6, y'all. Anyway, he completely shifts the gears, speeds up the tempo, and says he wants to out-funk Aretha Franklin's version of Respect. He runs a completely different structural plan, and Gordy finally lets it out, and Gladys takes it to number 2 on the charts in late 1967.
But Norman still wasn't done, Max.
No.
Oh, no. He knew Marvin's dark cinematic blueprint was ahead of its time. A year later, in 1968, he sneaks Marvin's version onto the Groove album at the end of the album. Radio DJs started playing it off the album.
They wouldn't even play the singles. They were playing this song.
Right, they were playing that song. The phone lines lit up like a short circuit, and Gordy was forced to release it as a single. Marvin's version blew the roof off the industry, and it stayed at number 1 for 7 weeks and became the biggest-selling Motown single of the entire decade.
A badass song, if ever I've heard one. Mm-hmm. That Grapevine victory, though, gave Norman the corporate leverage he needed to pull off the ultimate Funk Brothers inversion with the Temptations. He started introducing analog distortion as a primary building material. He hooked up wah-wah pedals, fuzz boxes, and Echoplex delay units directly to Dennis Coffey's guitar line. Look at a track like Cloud 9 in 1968. That opening guitar isn't just a polite strum. It's an aggressive, swirling, automated wah-wah frequency. And then he took James Jamerson's bass lines. He turned them into these heavy, hypnotic, repetitive loops that felt more like a factory machine than a standard pop rhythm.
Exactly. And look at how he handled the vocal tracking specs for the Temptations themselves.
Yeah, he killed it.
Yeah, he completely demolished the traditional lead singer and backup group dynamic. He engineered a multi-lead assembly line on tracks like Psychedelic Shack and I Can't Get Next to You. Dennis Edwards, Otis Williams, Melvin Franklin, Eddie Kendricks, and Paul Williams were all tossing the lead microphone back and forth like a construction crew passing bricks.
Completely simpatico, and this forced the group to function as a unified organism rather than as a backdrop for a single superstar ego. Hello, someone call David Ruffin, please. Let him know that. And this is a vital peer lesson for today's R&B artist, Soul fam. Drop the ego and design your arrangements so every creator's unique texture acts as a specific load-bearing column. Well, we're going to look at his cinematic masterpiece, Papa Was a Rolling Stone, when we return.
That's my favorite by them, Papa Was a Rolling Stone. So keep your dials locked. We're about to audit an 11-minute skyscraper.
That's right. You're listening to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we'll be right back.
And we're back with Max and Mello's Architects of Soul. So, Max, we have to dedicate an entire segment to the absolute pinnacle of this era, 1972's Papa Was a Rolling Stone.
What a great song.
Because this wasn't just a single, this was a 3-story musical complex.
Oh my God, it was. And the sheer audacity of scale on this track, it's mind-blowing, Mello. AM radio specs back then demanded pop tracks to stay under 3 minutes so stations could run commercials. Well, Norman Whitfield, he laughed at those zoning restrictions and delivered an album version that clocked it at 11 minutes and 45 seconds. Hey, guys, guess what?
Just think about the patience in that arrangement, though.
Oh, it's unreal.
The track opens with a single isolated hi-hat hitting a steady metronomic pulse. Then Bob Babbitt's bass drops that iconic, ominous 3-note phrase. Then a wah-wah guitar sneaks into that left channel. That's it. And a distant trumpet starts crying in the right channel. Norman Whitfield lets that instrumental foundation loop and build for nearly a full 4 minutes before a single human voice enters the room.
4 minutes. Think about that. 4 minutes, that loop. Man, that's bad. He was inventing cinematic soul. He wasn't just writing a song. Well, Norman, he was composing a short film using analog tape. And for the modern generation of artists, this teaches us the absolute power of atmospheric tension. In today's streaming landscape, everyone rushes to get to the hook within the first 15 seconds so the listener doesn't skip the track. But Norman Whitfield proved that if your groove has enough structural integrity, you can make the listener wait, build an undeniable suspense, and create a far deeper emotional payoff.
But man, Max, that patience caused some serious on-site friction with the Temptations themselves. The group was used to walking in, tracking their harmonies, and getting out.
Oh, not anymore.
Dennis Edwards famously hated how long the intro was and got into a massive shouting matches with Whitfield in the studio. Dennis felt the instrumentation was overshadowing the vocal prowess of the group.
Right, and the friction, it was real. Whitfield actually used that internal stress to his advantage. He purposely made Dennis sing the opening line. It was the 3rd of September over and over again until Dennis was so utterly frustrated that his vocal tape came out completely raw, exhausted, and angry. Well, that wasn't luck. That was Whitfield acting as a psychological contractor, manipulating the human elements to get the exact raw texture that the blueprint demanded.
And look at how far Norman stretched this vein across the rest of the Motown catalog. He took that exact same heavy psychedelic distorted format and expanded it to a massive roster of hits. He wrote and tracked War with the Temptations first, and then re-recorded it with Edwin Starr to turn it into an explosive, distorted #1 anthem.
Damn straight. Mm-hmm. War! Good God, yo.
He took the group, The Undisputed Truth, and gave them the haunting psychedelic classic Smiling Faces Sometimes.
Another great song.
Yeah, it was originally also recorded by the Temptations, but turned into a sprawling 12-minute psych-funk layout for The Truth.
Exactly. Norman didn't just limit the renovation to the Temptations. He created an entire ecosystem of grit. Tracks like Ball of Confusion, Runaway Child Running Wild, and Message from a Black Man. They tackled heavy suburban materialism, institutional prison systems, and racial inequality. Man, Norman, he completely re-engineered what soul music was allowed to say and look like.
And it went on to win 3 Grammys and hit #1 on the pop charts.
Sure did.
It proved to the entire corporate music industry that long-form cinematic black art could be globally commercial without compromising its structural grit.
That's right. He opened up a whole new sector of the industry. An incredible run beginning in 1966 when he seized the production keys for the Temptations' Ain't Too Proud to Beg and on lock for the next decade and a half, his name on a ledger guaranteeing a global sonic earthquake.
Yes, Max. Norman was an absolute purist and a perfectionist when it came to his sonic designs.
That's right. He sure was, Mello. He spent years battling the strict assembly line corporate layout of Motown.
True indeed. Whether it was sneaking, I'd heard it through the grapevine, past Barry Gordy's quality control board, Max.
A massive job.
Massive. Forcing Cloud9 into the market despite corporate panic over the lyrics, or defying AM radio zoning laws to put out an 11-minute and 45-second version of Papa Was a Rolling Stone.
That's right. Every time Norman wanted to push the architectural boundaries of soul music, he had to play a high-stakes chess match with the front office soul fam. So by the mid-1970s, that constant friction wore down the foundation. This compounded with the fact that Motown was leaving town, and that breaking point was structurally aligned with that major physical move by the company.
It's truly horrible, Max.
It was.
The tragic reality of the 1972 move is that Barry Gordy and the executive team ran a highly calculated, multi-tiered relocation scheme.
But not for the players, Mello. The musicians who actually laid down the brickwork in the basement, the Funk Brothers, they were left completely in the dark, famously finding out their contracts were terminated via that cold note taped to the door of Studio A that we all know about.
But Norman Whitfield wasn't just a line worker, and by 1972, he was now vice president.
Yeah, he was a honcho.
Yeah, he was also the head of quality control and the chief hitmaker, holding up the entire commercial ceiling of the company with Papa Was a Rolling Stone. Because of this high-level executive access, Norman got deeply involved in the corporate transition planning.
And actively participating in the move, Mello. And by late 1971 and in early 1972, Norman was already traveling out to L.A. to cut tracks in Motown's new, better-equipped West Coast studio rooms. He was intentionally transitioning his tracking style, bringing in new California-based funk session players to layer his psychedelic soul sound.
So when the physical eviction finally dropped on the Detroit crew in 1972, Norman was already fully set up on the new West Coast lot. Knowing it was almost time, but not making the move to break away immediately, still putting up with the Barry Gordy hustle.
Right, Mello. He stayed inside that Motown ecosystem for another 3 years, tracking hits out of L.A. until 1975, when the creative suffocation and corporate friction finally pushed him to cut ties completely and launch Whitfield Records.
In 1975, Motown officially packed up its blueprints, closed down Hitsville U.S.A. in Detroit, and relocated the entire operation to Los Angeles to focus heavily on Hollywood, television, and film divisions.
Now, we all know how they left without telling a whole lot of people. And at the same time, internal tension was growing on the studio floor. The Temptations themselves were pushed to the limits, growing frustrated because Norman was prioritizing heavy psychedelic instrumentation over their traditional vocal blends, and he was completely refusing to write the standard love ballads that they wanted.
It was frustrating on both sides, Max.
I'm sure it was.
The Temptations weren't happy with their direction, and Norman realized that if he stayed within the legacy Motown framework, he would always be answering to someone else's corporate ledger and dealing with artist mutinies. He wanted to be the sole owner of the land he was building on.
And you can't blame him, Mello. You really can't. So Norman finally grew tired of the corporate interference at Motown. He walked away in 1975 to build his own independent lot, Whitfield Records, which was financed by Warner Brothers. He even convinced his psychedelic soul creation, The Undisputed Truth, to break their Motown contracts and follow him to his new independent lot.
And by setting up his own shop in California, he gained total zoning autonomy.
Exactly, Mello. No more Friday morning quality control vetoes, no more corporate constraints on track lengths, and no more arguments over distortion. It was that exact independent freedom that allowed him to take a struggling local band, add a powerhouse lead vocalist, and engineer the multi-platinum, Grammy-winning masterwork of Car Wash entirely on his own terms.
So it's 1975, and movie director Michael Schultz had just directed the massive 1975 hit Cooley High for American International Pictures. Next up for him was filming a gritty ensemble comedy about a day in the life of a local Los Angeles car wash starring Richard Pryor and George Carlin, two of the best.
Two of our favorites, yes.
Yeah.
So he commissions Norman to write the entire film score, Soul Fam. Now, tapped for this, Norman knew how critical a classic soul foundation was to a film's pacing. And Universal Pictures' music arm was directly tied to MCA Records Mello. And they needed Norman to deliver a double album soundtrack that could cross markets. And because Norman had just walked away in 1975 from Motown and set up his independent lot in Los Angeles, well, he was the hottest free agent producer on the West Coast. Michael Schultz and the film's producers approached Norman directly at his new headquarters, pitching him on a basic plot outline for a movie that hadn't even fully been scripted yet or shot.
When Schultz and Universal handed Norman the blueprint, he actually did not want the project at first, Max. Norman was a pure album constructor. He didn't like the idea of working under a movie studio's constraints or answering to Hollywood suits.
Till he saw the money. Well, Mello, he audited his assets and realized Car Wash offered two massive structural advantages, and I mean massive. First, Universal and MCA were throwing around major Hollywood capital, and boy, at that time, they were throwing money around. And the budget and back-end royalty percentages on the soundtrack were massive. But the real catalyst, Soul Fam, Norman had recently signed a multi-piece funk band called Total Concept Unlimited to his new Whitfield Records label.
He was searching for a massive high-exposure vehicle.
You can see we're having a lot of fun with massive
Exactly.
this season.
He was searching for a massive high-exposure vehicle to launch them under a new brand name, Max. Rolls-Royce. Norman told Schultz he would take the gig on one strict condition.
Right, Mello. His new independent band got the exclusive contract to track the entire score. Schultz agreed, giving Norman absolute zoning authority over the sound. And even though Motown wasn't legally involved in the deal, well, Norman used his old Detroit Rolodex to execute the physical recording.
And because Rolls-Royce was a young, fresh asset, Max, Norman needed some veteran load-bearing columns to reinforce the tracking sessions.
Right you are, Mello. So he secretly flew out his favorite elite session masters from his old Motown days, including legendary guitar wizard Melvin Wawa Watson and master trombonist arranger Paul Reiser to assist Rolls-Royce in the room.
And the resulting double LP wasn't distributed by Motown either. It dropped on MCA Records in September of 1976. By bypassing his old label entirely, Norman kept the financial liquidity inside his own firm.
Keeping the green.
Gave Rolls-Royce 3 Billboard Top 10 singles and handed Michael Schultz a multi-platinum cultural landmark that won the 1977 Grammy Award for Best Scored Soundtrack Album.
Not a bad day's work. Now, this mellow led to Norman's absolute final, massive, culturally defining #1 hit in Car Wash by Rolls-Royce, released in late 1976. What a funky tune that was. But first, Soul Fam, he had to write that theme. And Norman, at the time, he was suffering from a massive bout of writer's block. Not a really happy place for a writer to be.
We've all been there, yeah.
Oh, my God, not a good place. But he had the band. He had the budget. But he could not find the core hook for the movie's theme song.
Well, one afternoon, he was sitting on his couch watching a basketball game while eating a bucket of fried chicken. Him and the Colonel, just chilling.
That's right, him and Colonel Sanders trying to figure out what the hell they're going to say. But you never know when it's going to hit your brain, Soul Fam. Suddenly for Norman Whitfield, the rhythm of the game and the concept hit his brain like a lightning bolt. He didn't have a notepad or a piece of manuscript paper nearby, so terrified he'd lose the frequency, Norman grabbed the greasy Kentucky Fried Chicken box wrapper, pulled out a pen out of his pocket, and scribbled down the entire baseline blueprint and the lyrics. You might not ever get rich, but let me tell you, it's better than Day in a Ditch.
Well, Max, when he brought Rolls-Royce into the studio to track it, the band was incredibly skeptical.
They were like, what?
The guitarists in the horn section thought a song about washing cars was silly and beneath their musical literacy.
I'm going to play on a song about washing cars?
Norman ignored their complaints and focused on the percussive mechanics.
And to create that iconic metronomic double hand clap that drives the entire track, Norman didn't use a machine or standard overdubbing. No, he lined up the entire band, along with studio assets and secretaries, in a straight line inside the tracking room. He then made them march in place and clap in perfect unison into a single microphone to get that massive. Organic industrial-grade acoustic displacement.
And guess what, y'all? It went double platinum.
Double platinum.
It hit number one on both the Billboard Hot 100 and the R&B charts, and won Norman the 1977 Grammy Award for Best Score Soundtrack Album. He followed it up by drafting two more legendary timeless classics on that same soundtrack, I Want to Get Next to You and I'm Going Down, which Mary J. Blige famously excavated and covered in 1994.
Oh, she sure did. And we're going to talk about Norman and his journey and the permanent ripple effect this era left on modern urban music when we come back. Don't move. The final inspection is coming up. You're listening to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul. Thanks for tuning into Architects of Soul. Our music is waiting for you. Hey, welcome back to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul. And before we run our final diagnostic check on this psychedelic legacy, if you like this content, please give a like and subscribe to our channel.
And remember, there's a video version available on our YouTube page if you feel like watching instead of just listening.
So, Mello, as Norman moved into the late 1970s and the 1980s, his reputation on the job site was that of a brilliant, completely unyielding dictator of sound. He treated the studio like a hyper-stereo laboratory. Norman famously stated that Sly Stone taught him that record production wasn't just about capturing music. It was the science of sound.
Norman Whitfield became so obsessed with perfection that he told music journalist Nelson George, "It takes a lot of research, and I really consider myself somewhat of a perfectionist. I don't like to speculate, and I don't like to take chances with my guys."
Yet Norman's father's car famously broke down in Detroit by pure chance when Norman was a kid, and that is the only reason he ended up in the city to find Berry Gordy in the first place. And so he never forgot that a random mechanical failure changed his entire destiny, which is why he ran his studio sessions with military precision.
When Norman first started at Motown, Gordy paid him just $15 a week to sit in a room and grade tracks for the quality control meeting. Norman said his job consisted of being totally honest about what records you were listening to.
Yes, Mello, and he carried that brutal, unfiltered honesty with him for the rest of his life. If a musician played a sloppy line, well, Norman would stop the tape and tear them down in front of the room, demanding they execute the blueprint correctly.
Even when Norman went into semi-retirement in the late 80s and 90s, his financial infrastructure was indestructible. During a legal audit in 2005, it was revealed that Norman was still quietly pulling in over $500,000 a year.
No joke. And he did this, Mel, in pure royalty liquidity, simply because his tracks were constantly being reissued, sampled by hip-hop producers, and licensed for over 50 major Hollywood film soundtracks. He built a foundation so structurally sound that the concrete never cracked, keeping him financially secure until he passed away in 2008.
And Max, when you look at the landscape of modern R&B, neo-soul, and even hip-hop today, the structural blueprints left behind by Norman Whitfield are everywhere. He literally laid the tracking rails for the next 50 years of urban music production.
Oh, definitely, without a doubt. If you listen to the heavy, dark, druggy textures of modern alternative R&B, artists like The Weeknd, Bryson Tiller, or Frank Ocean that use heavy bass loops, ambient vocal delays, and cinematic interludes, well, you're looking directly at the house that Norman Whitfield built. He proved that soul music didn't always have to be bright, smiling, and optimistic. He showed that you could use the studio as an experimental canvas to paint the darker, moodier, and more complex realities of life.
And let's talk about the sample value of this era.
Let's.
The hypnotic stripped-down grooves he engineered for the Funk Brothers became the literal foundational concrete for the golden era of hip-hop. Producers like Dr. Dre, Pete Rock, and the RZA didn't just sample those tracks for a quick hook. They sampled them because Whitfield's drum pockets and bass loops had so much internal torque that you could build an entire hip-hop empire right on top of them.
And that's a massive level in long-term brand equity for modern creators. So when you create music that relies purely on trendy, cheap sonic gimmicks, you're building rots within a couple of years. But when you engineer a rhythm track with a deep, visceral human pocket, that foundation remains structurally sound for generations to come. Other artists will be coming back to excavate your catalog decades later.
Whitfield and the Temptations took the ultimate corporate risk. They jeopardized their status as America's clean-cut sweethearts to become radical sonic prophets.
They surely did, Mel.
They forced the gatekeepers to expand the boundaries of what black music was allowed to look and sound like.
And they broke the mold so that today's independent artists could have the freedom to build whatever kind of structure they wanted.
Let's pack up the tools and get ready to close out this session.
That's right. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to toss this letter in the mailbox. You're listening to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we'll be right back.
Don't go away. And we're back with Max and Mello's Architects of Soul. This has been a heavy session, Max.
Oh, sure has been, Mello.
Yeah, deconstructing the shift from the clean Motown assembly line to the grit pedals and multi-lead vocal arrangements of the psychedelic era.
Pretty cool. Norman Whitfield and the Temptations are the master draftspeople of artistic evolution. They taught every upcoming artist in R&B and soul today that the true longevity requires the courage to renovate your sound when the world around you changes. They showed us that the studio isn't just a place to capture a performance. It is an active instrument capable of shifting cultural boundaries.
They embraced the distortion, leaned into the friction, and built a timeless sonic skyline out of raw street reality.
Some pretty badass shit. They flipped that script from the pristine ballroom elegance of early Motown to the heavy smoke-filled basement grit of Norman Whitfield's psychedelic era, really hitting home for anyone tracking and producing music today. It proves that when the culture shifts outside your studio walls, you have to have the creative guts to crank up the gain staging, step on the wah pedals, and completely overhaul your sonic real estate. And as always, we want to close with our final thought and our hope for all of us, our art, our craft, and our creations.
Keep that soul fire burning, protect your sound, nurture your creativity, own your voice, and remember the lessons from the giants who came before.
And yes, protect your masters and seek out wise mentors who can guide you on your journey. And until next we meet, peace and soul, y'all.